You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And this is John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NACS. And Jeff, I'm excited about this conversation. You know, a lot of times on this program, we talk about the fuel markets, but the problem with that is only half the equation. And we really need to be thinking about what's going on in the automotive industry. And today we've got the chief economist of the National Auto Dealers Association, Patrick Manzi, to talk about what's happening in the market. So Patrick, thank you so much for joining us on Convenience Matters today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
You know, you joined Fuels Institute at our annual meeting in 2021, and we chatted about the impact of cost and economics. And you really kind of brought some perspective to what's going on in the auto industry. I mean, 21 was just a brutal year for your guys. Tell us a little bit about who your members are and kind of your big picture takeaways from 21.
Certainly. So NADA, we represent franchise light vehicle dealers across the country. So those are your local Ford, Chevy dealers that sell new cars. We don't represent the small mom and pop used car stores, though. But we do advocate before federal agencies and government and Congress on behalf of the dealers. We offer regulatory guidance as well as some educational tools, among a lot of other things. So it's been a big year for us. There's been a lot of challenges, a lot of new legislation coming out that has affected auto dealers. So certainly our regulatory and legal departments have been kind of working overtime. As far as sales go, the story of 2021 was limited inventory from the semiconductor microchip shortage. We really started to hear whispers of this just at the start of 21. They were saying this is only going to last a few months. And here we are at the start of 2022, and production is still being impacted by this microchip shortage. And the story really was that demand was out there to sell, kind of our historical high benchmark 17 million units or so last year. But the inventory was so pinched that sales came in at 14.9 million, just a 500,000 more than the really severely COVID impacted year of 2020. That's the short overview of what happened with sales. But again, we're looking halfway through the year of 2022 before we start to see inventories be able to build back up on dealer lots because there's still so much demand out there.
And obviously, the challenges with new cars put pressure on used cars. And those exploded last year in sales. And weren't they north of 40 million?
Yeah, I haven't seen absolute final data yet, but yes, I do expect it's going to be a record year for that. Over 40, maybe even 41 million units by the time all the final data is counted. Pricing for used inventory was up a good bit as well. I have some data here. I'm going to, if you don't mind, but at the end in 2020, the average used vehicle at franchise dealerships retailed for $22,970, and in 2021 it jumped to $27,124. By far the biggest increase in used vehicle prices that we've seen on record. And then meanwhile, over at wholesale auctions, because you've now got rental car companies, other big fleet players in the mix looking to buy this used vehicle inventory. Wholesale auction prices set records consistently throughout last year. And, it's likely we're going to see some more wholesale records here in the first half of 22 as well.
I don't think there's a better example of the impact of supply and demand than what you just described. I mean, I remember I bought a vehicle last year and traded in my vehicle, and I could have waited 2 months, gotten a lot more money for my trade-in, but I probably waited 6 months for my new vehicle delivery. Yeah. And it was just this gainful. I remember talking to a friend of mine who works for an auto company, said, look, we've got like 2 days of inventory. That's all we have. We usually have 10 to 15. There's like 6 vehicles on my lot. I mean, how are we supposed to deal with that? I mean, you said that the chip shortage probably can continue till middle of this year. Is there, once that's resolved, how long does it take to recover an equilibrium so that the price is stabilized to reflect actual market conditions rather than the acute pain we've had the last 12 months?
I think we're looking, especially on the used vehicle side, we're looking to 2024 before we start to see normalization there, because it's going to take, if the chip shortage eats away at production for the first half of this year, and we really aren't, and dealers continue to sell everything that comes off the truck right away, well, then we can't start rebuilding until the second half of this year. And so then it's going to take, maybe we're back at, we ended the year at about 1.1 million or so units on the ground. The average in 18 and 19 was around 3.8 million. So a huge decrease. And just to get back to 2.5 million, which is what a lot of the OEMs say, they don't want to go to the crazy high levels where they have to discount all the time, but they also want to have enough cars for everybody. So even to get back to 2.5, we're looking mid 23 into 23 as well. Just because, there are some estimates coming out from, some of our friends at JD Power that there's roughly 5 million units out there of pent-up demand. So you're going to have, and let's just, for an example here, let's say the retail demand is met, boom, like that. There's still fleet customers who are rolling on these 100,000 mile used vehicles that are going to rental fleets, et cetera. And so even once the retail side's met, which has been the priority of OEMs throughout this whole thing, the fleet customers are going to be there waiting.
Jeff, one of the things that Patrick said at the Fuels Conference I thought was poignant is people buy vehicles not based necessarily on the total MSRP, but on their monthly payments. And he showed a slide that monthly payments last 12 to 18 months went up like $100 per month for used and new cars. And that's while they're extending the loan term. I mean, the impact on family economies from vehicle prices, and then you mentioned fuel prices at $80, $85 a barrel. I mean, the pinch on the family economy is on. And I don't know how long it's going to take to clear that out and get us back to an equilibrium where people feel comfortable that their transportation costs are not going to take a disproportionate share of their income.
Oh, absolutely. And Patrick, typically in a given year, fuel costs are, I believe transportation costs are in that 5-6% range of total family income. Obviously, a lot more this year. With fuel retailers, we often hear when prices go up, it's gouging. It's obviously somebody's up to no good. I would imagine the same thing is happening at the auto dealer level where the frustration is taken out. And if you don't understand what's going on with chips and some of these other things, that you have some explaining to do in how the market works. And obviously you've done that here and you do that regularly. But are there customers that just don't understand what's going on and assume that somebody's taking advantage of the situation?
I bet you there still exists that marginal customer who's just kept their head in the sand all year. But I mean, by this point, we're reading stories about this every day. So I would expect most people know what to expect, either just from talking to a friend or a neighbor and saying, I'm really having a hard time finding the car I want. Do you know what's going on? And so while early on, I think that was a big issue. Now I think it's just you're seeing a lot of people rolling those used cars for far longer than they would have in the past. We're seeing service and parts revenue go up at the average store too, because customers want to keep their car going until there's, it's not even necessarily the pricing that may keep some customers away, but maybe you can't get the color you want. Maybe you can't get the trim and engine combo you want. And then there's a long wait. So, all of those factors add up to put pressure on these customers and put pressure on these older vehicles that they continue to run.
And I guess, John, thinking that through, if people are spending more on cars and if they aren't able to get a quote unquote deal, where do they look to cut back? And I think that's the concern for fuel retailers. Is it going to be octane? Is it going to be doing something inside the store? Is it going to be some other behavior? And I don't know if that's something that the Fuels Institute's also looking at.
We haven't looked at that in particular. We're more focused on the consumer behavior, especially when it comes to their purchase decision, Patrick. We've heard the wives' tales, as I classify it. When prices go up, people change their vehicle. They shop for more efficient vehicles. They downsize their vehicle. And we've always countered, look, people have needs. If you have a family of 5, you're not buying a subcompact car. I don't care how much gasoline is. But we've also, shifting a little bit, the pressure from government, ESG investors, the auto manufacturers to transition to EVs, electric vehicles. From the dealer on the ground perspective, when gas prices go up, are customers coming and say, hey, I need to get a more fuel efficient car? Are they willing to pay for that? And as we start looking at hybrids and electric vehicles, are they asking for them? Do they care? Or is it kind of like just the well-off, well-informed are the ones thinking, yeah, I'm going to give this a shot? I mean, are we starting to see any type of mass transition to interest for this?
So with respect to your first question, shifting away from bigger cars to smaller cars. Now, that happened about a decade ago when we first saw gas prices top $4 a gallon. But that back then, you have to remember, people were driving pickups built in the late 90s, early 2000s. They're still getting 10 mpg. Today, you can get a pickup that gets 25. So, more than 100% increase in your fuel economy. And in real terms, most places are still under $4. We're a little over $3. So there's less of the shifting categories. But what consumers are demanding, and you're seeing manufacturers now offering hybrid powertrains on pickups, 3-row SUVs. The Toyota Sienna minivan is only offered as a hybrid. Because they believe that customers are willing to pay for that, those incremental gains in fuel economy. And, in the van I mentioned, let's figure an old V6 van probably got 20 mpg on its best day, and they're quoting 30 for the Sienna. So that's a huge increase. And if you're doing a lot of driving, that can really bring down your total cost of ownership. So, while it's not, we aren't yet seeing everybody want an EV, we are definitely seeing increased sales for EVs. But some of these transitionary powertrains are really gaining popularity with consumers, be it the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid, because they're in the popular segments.
Is there any country that best may show what the future looks like for EV sales in the U.S.? I know everybody touts Norway, where something like 80% of the cars right now that are sold are EVs. But if you look at places like China, I think 1 out of 6 EVs are now sold in China. It's been an explosion of sales there. But is there a model that might play out closest to what might happen with the U.S. as EV sales will grow?
It's interesting because I believe both of those places heavily incentivize, or I should say heavily disincentivize, the purchase of an ICE vehicle. I've heard tales in China. I'm not still sure if this goes on, but you had to enter a lottery if you bought an ICE vehicle to get a plate. But if you bought an EV, you're guaranteed a plate. So, if it's your choices, I might be able to drive by this car and not be able to go anywhere, or I can definitely use this as it's intended. I think that will push a lot of people in that direction. Now, I don't think we're going to see those type of incentives here in the U.S. I do think, though, that there'll be some cash on the hood or tax credits. And, we at NADA have been working with a lot of the federal agencies just to communicate to them that whatever incentives are out there, they have to work in the showroom. And the way to make Americans change their buying habits is to make it affect the monthly payment. That's what it is. It's what it's all is. Either bring that payment down to a comparable price of an ICE vehicle, or something along those lines. Because still, let me pull up my little cheat sheet here just because I wanted to share this with you. I pulled some more data from J.D. Power's website. Last year, the average new vehicle, of all powertrains was 43,000. If you just pull out just battery electric vehicles, it was 56,653. So 14 grand more for the average BEV. And that's a lot. That's a couple $100, maybe $300 a month, monthly payment. So you're going to have to bring that down if you want to incentivize the customers to do that.
I think you made a good point that we're starting to see these alternative powertrains, hybrids, electric, in the type of vehicle customers want to buy. They want to buy utility vehicles. They want to buy pickup trucks. They're not buying a whole lot of sedans unless they're buying luxury cars. And we've been tracking this for the last 20 years, and the trend's not slowing down. But we're starting to see these powertrains in these models. I think hybrids last year got up to close to 6% of sales, which is huge. And I think that's because the automakers were planning that during the CAFE under the Obama era. I'm very interested to see how the electric pickup trucks fare.
Yeah.
A lot of hype, a lot of interest. How many are they going to produce compared to how many want to be purchased? I mean, that's the big question is, I think they're going to solve a demand curve, but are they going to do it on volume? And that's where I'm really questioning where the trajectory goes.
Yeah, these first few models, I think, are going to just be gobbled up by the people who are really into the new hot thing, and then we will slowly see if they work on the job site, if they work for towing, et cetera, for what people want to use a truck for. For putting 5 people and all your luggage, I mean, I think they're perfect still. You can still probably do a big trip, a 3 or 4 hour trip, and it's really no issue. But that's what I'm interested to see, is how people who use some of these utility vehicles for work react to them, because I think that's going to be the thing that will pull people out of their gas engines, diesel engines in those segments if they can use it.
Yeah, you mentioned towing, and you're right. I mean, so I've got a plug-in hybrid Wrangler, and I'll take it all gas to the trail. I'll get to the trail. I have about 25 miles of estimated range on electric. Flip it to electric. Nice, quiet, rock crawling. It's a lot of fun. It's a 7.5 mile trail. I have like less than 5 miles left of range because the pressure on the battery to go over those rocks was a lot higher than going on the highway. And so I think, the duty cycle on an electric vehicle mode is very different. I think it's going to take customers a while to understand that, sure, your vehicle may be rated 300 miles. That really depends on how you drive it.
Yeah, that's a 72-degree day on flat land.
Right.
Cruise set.
It's like if you stomp on the gas in a ICE engine at the green light, you're going to get lower fuel economy. If you do that in an electric vehicle, you're going to get less range. Yeah. I mean, it's a combination. People need to realize that it's not a guaranteed range.
That's true. Yeah. And, and the other issue, I think, too, is we have a lot of winter climates here in the U.S., and that's something that people are going to have to get used to as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the commercial really grabbed me in seeing the EV truck that your power goes out in your home. You just plug in your truck and everything's cool. You can go back to cooking. Your everything in your refrigerator doesn't spoil. I don't know how long that works as your generator, but that's a really fun added benefit you can't get from a regular car. And I think things like that may play out in addition to some of the things that we've seen with traditional surveys, where the two things that people look for in EVs is either I care about environmental issues, green issues, or I care about quote unquote free gas because charging is free, even though it's not free. So those are the two dominant issues. I don't want to pay for gas anymore, and I want to do something about the environment. And then you throw in that, hey, here's a little thing that EVs can do that nobody else can do. And I don't know how it'll play out and which segments will be looking for what as we go down the road, but I assume NADA's looking at some of those things.
Kudos to Ford for taking that terrible situation in Texas and those couple news stories written about those F-150s. And I mean, I don't know if those were planned for the F-150 Lightning, but I bet you they got a call saying you better get some outlets in that thing. But that's certainly one of the benefits. Yeah, you can use it as a generator. I'll tell you, we had a snowstorm. My house is all electric power. Power went out for the day. I would have liked to have one of those trucks parked outside. Maybe it's interesting. The top reasons consumers buy cars: payments and safety. Those are typically 1 and 2. They maybe flip year to year, but that's the deal. That's what they want, and it'll be interesting to see some of these extra features if that's the final thing. If everything is safe, if everything is roughly the same price, what's the feature that's going to pull you over? So it's certainly interesting, and I'm excited to see it too.
There's certain categories of vehicles that they've talked about electrifying. And, Jeff, you mentioned added benefits on an EV. Driving an electric vehicle is fun. They're quick, they're responsive, they're an absolute blast. But, I was in a Tesla Roadster years ago on a test drive out in Palo Alto with the chairman of NACS, and we pulled up the red light, and this thing snaps your head back when you accelerate. It was so fast. And a Porsche GT3 rolled up beside us, boom, 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 boom. And I looked at the chairman of NACS, I go, we could beat him across the line. He just laughed. He's going to look and sound so much better doing it, John, because that roaring. And so I've heard this argument that the Challenger is going to come in all electric. And I'm just wondering how many muscle car enthusiasts want a quiet car. That's just going to be this mix of, the capability may be superior, but the experience is going to be so different. I mean, to what extent is experience for the customer important? I know that payments, the various things that need stuff, but there's still a tangible emotional connection to vehicles for a lot of customers. Is that starting to wane? We've heard a lot of people say the car is not what it used to be. It's just a commodity. I don't believe that. I mean, are you guys seeing any change in customer mentality with regards to their passion for vehicles?
Well, what I'd say is, one of just those connections that consumers want. I think that's one of the things that helps me inform my forecasts for the end of the decade. We're still thinking maybe 15 to 20% EV penetration in the new vehicle side by the end of the decade. And then, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, maybe another 20% or so. So that means there's still going to be ICE vehicles out there for the customers that want them. And I think it will likely see them from manufacturers who produce enough EVs and hybrids so that they can still make the V8, the burbles, or whatever it is. It's a long way of saying that I think at least in the short term, over the next decade or so, those options will exist for customers who want them. But at the same time, I would say that Dodge maybe loses some people because I don't want to be the guy with the loud car waking my neighbors up. But maybe if you have this electric thing that looks cool and you're not going to bug your neighbors with it, maybe that brings some people into the brand. So I could see it kind of going both ways.
Yeah.
So I know that predictions are always difficult, and you talked about it might be a couple more years before everything works its way through the system. And, John and I, we've seen going to auto shows over the last couple of years that the importance of chips, because really cars have four wheels and they do so much more than take you around. They are your entertainment system. They're all kinds of things. So unless you have a car with manually roll down windows and all those things, it's gonna need some chips. But are there any other things that you see over the next year or so related to what might happen in the auto market, whether it's new cars or used cars?
Really, the big story is just meeting that pin-up demand. That's going to be the biggest challenge because people have, at least the average, a lot of new car buying people. They're different, maybe from your average used car buyer. A lot of people who buy new cars are doing pretty well right now. They've maybe gotten some raises. They've been employed for most of these past few years, but their discretionary spending has gone down some. So I think there's a lot of people out there who are in the market for a new car, and meeting that demand is going to be the key because until we meet that new car demand, used prices are going to be high, and we're not going to start to see them come down any, which is something that I'm concerned about because you want to be able to meet the needs of the average American family. They still need transportation. They still need to get around. So kind of solving this inventory crisis on the new side, I think is going to go a long way towards helping improve vehicle affordability for kind of your median household in the country.
I see some parallels between what we're dealing with now and the Great Recession, because when the Great Recession hit, people couldn't afford to buy cars. They were holding off, especially commercial customers. They waited. They were holding on to their pickups and their utility vans a lot longer. And then when the market started coming, you saw a spike in truck sales. And everybody said, look, Americans are in love with trucks. Well, yeah, we are. But the commercial side, they had delayed their replacement by 5 years.
Yeah.
And so now they have to delay the replacement because there's nothing to replace it with.
Exactly.
And so I can see a surge in demand after the next 3 years because these companies are running their trucks as hard as they can. They're ready to replace them, but they can't because they just can't get anything. So I think your comment on will the electric vehicles serve the commercial industry and the fleet and the workers, that'll be interesting because by the time we start getting inventory, those guys are going to be hungry to buy a new vehicle.
That's true.
And it'll be very interesting to see, will they take the plunge to buy the EV?
Yeah, that new, I like that new little small Ford Maverick with the hybrid powertrain, the shop truck. And it seems to me like if you get used to that, it's not too big of a leap to go to that full EV. And, for the duty cycle of, your average workman, pest control people, shop runners, et cetera, an EV could really work for that because you're not towing a lot. You're probably going less than 200 miles a day. You can charge at home. And you're right. I do think that by the time here in a couple of years, once this is all behind us and more of these models come out, that the commercial industry could adapt. It's not going to be Class 8 trucks hauling freight across the country, right. But your small independent operators, EVs could really help them out a lot, I think, with their fuel costs and their running costs and their costs for their business.
Jeff, that's exactly what we've been saying at the Fuels Institute is let's deploy the proper solutions for the right duty cycles, the right use cases. Let's capitalize on that, because if you try to electrify everything at once, we're going to fail.
Yeah.
But there's certain segments of the economy that electric vehicles make a ton of sense, and others not quite so much yet. Maybe later down the road, but not quite so much yet. So I think it's going to be very interesting as an observer and a market analyst to watch what happens. Mm-hmm. I'm just glad I don't have to sell any vehicles, because that does not sound like an easy job at all.
It's tough these days. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about 50 to 60 million units moving a year, whether it's new or used, that has massive implications on the economy. It has massive implications on society, and it has massive implications at the retail level. How do we sell fuel? So, Patrick, I have a feeling we're going to be talking again because of the implications of the automobile market. So, well, you hear that music. That means it's our time for our little palate cleanser with our trivia that we've started this year for podcasts. And today we have some President's Day trivia. It's related to presidents and convenience stores. So, Patrick, here's our question today. Wawa, which sells an awful lot of gas, began as an iron foundry way back in 1803. Didn't start having convenience stores. It was known as Wood Brothers back then. Didn't add convenience stores till a lot later. But there is one president who worked for the company since 1803. Is it Joe Biden? And these three of these are not correct. One of them is correct. Joe Biden, he worked at the store as a summer job in the 1960s. Is it Abraham Lincoln? He helped collect delinquent accounts in the 1840s. Is it Martin Van Buren? His law firm helped incorporate the new company in the 1800s. And I believe, John, it was part of the Van Buren gang, too, back then, if you know Seinfeld. Or was it Herbert Hoover? His engineering firm conducted site surveys in the 1910s to get the company new sites. So, Joe Biden, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Van Buren, or Herbert Hoover?
I'm going to go with Hoover.
John?
I know the answer. I'm not allowed to participate. We've had this conversation before.
Okay. The answer is Abe Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
Abe Lincoln. He helped collect. He was. They had some property in Springfield, Illinois. They hired this young, recent law firm graduate, and apparently he wasn't very good at it. But they do have 2 canceled checks from him, and Abe Lincoln. That's not bad company.
I'll just say, in my household, we're a Sheets family, not a Wawa gang. So can't blame me for this one.
Well, thank you for...
and the rivalry continues.
Yes.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.